Mother Teresa's latter years were fraught with difficulty. She was in terrible condition and suffered from bodily pain on a daily basis. For years before her death, she revealed something unexpected to her fellow sisters. Let's find out precisely what it is, and believe me, you won't want to miss it. Despite founded the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa feared that she or one of her fellow sisters or brothers might do or say anything inappropriate that would detract from the order's goal. This dread could explain why she was unwilling to openly reveal the internal fight of faith she faced in her final days. Despite Teresa's efforts to escape scandal, it eventually caught up with her. But not until she had died for 10 years. This is where the narrative becomes truly intriguing. In 2007, a book called Come Be My Light was published, which included her personal and private communications. This work provoked both sorrow and bewilderment among her supporters, as well as delight in her critiques. They were enjoying someone else's misfortune. Teresa's writings revealed that, with the exception of a brief interval, she felt a strong sense of God's absence over the last 50 years of her life. Despite this spiritual darkness, she stayed committed to the task she had begun for God, and the majority of the world was oblivious of her inner turmoil. When the news emerged, many Christians were perplexed. What did Teresa's extended spiritual wilderness mean? Was she battling depression? Did she lose confidence in God? What gave her the strength to persevere, even when she felt abandoned by God? Teresa's closest companions and charity missionaries were also perplexed. She had never clearly acknowledged her darkness, with the exception of a faint illusion. That would have been incomprehensible to anybody other than her confessors, with whom she continued her inner conflict. For years before her death, she warned her other sisters about the constant presence of the devil, who tries to make them believe that Jesus does not truly love or cling to them. They had no idea that this warning was based on personal experience. So, now that Mother Teresa was no longer alive, and the critics could smear her as they saw fit, what did they do? You may want to pay close attention now. Teresa's adversary used the discoveries in Can't Be My Light to paint her as a false saint, accusing her of hypocrisy for her devotion. If you enjoy our content and want to support us, click on the Super Thanks button below. Your Super Thanks is not just a donation. It is a blessing that supports our mission to share the transformative journey of Jesus. A longtime critic, Christopher Hitch, described Teresa as a confused old lady who had lost faith. He claimed that her service to others was simply an attempt to alleviate her own sorrow. He further stated that the Catholic Church's portrayal of Teresa's spiritual desert as a dark night of the soul was a deceptive marketing technique to convert anguish into faith. Mother Teresa was depressed. Depression causes laziness. But Mother Teresa was always active, motivated by her sense of God's call. Furthermore, dark periods may not always reflect a loss of faith. In the Christian tradition, they are regarded as pivotal times for spiritual development. Many Christian saints have described their experiences with darkness and their relationship with God. But St. John of the Cross, a 16th century mystic, provides the most insightful interpretation. Mother Teresa was familiar with his works, which represented both her desire for God and her sense of being unloved by him. But this is where the story takes a turn. According to John the Cross, the black night of the soul represents a sense of abandonment by God. It causes excruciating pain and agony, as if you were burdened with darkness. However, this sense of rejection is part of a purifying process that prepares the soul for a genuine relationship with God. The duration of a black night of the soul varies, and while questions may arise, this does not imply that the sufferer has lost faith in God. In her writings, Mother Teresa described the agony of feeling rejected by God and the absence of His presence. However, she was not alone. Did you know that Saint Teresa de Lisieux also felt abandoned? So, what precisely is happening here? Let's go a little deeper. Mother Teresa's anguish during God's absence was severe, as evidenced by her private correspondence. She longed for God, yet the darkness persisted, creating a paradox in her psyche. She sought peace in Our Lady and believed that God had abandoned her. The darkness overwhelmed her, making her feel completely alone. Teresa devoted herself to this task because she felt it was what Christ expected of her. As she frequently stated, as she cared for the impoverished and the sick, she ministered to Christ in His terrible disguise, the Christ who thirsts. Given that she shared in the pain of those she served, it's possible that Teresa would eventually see her own inner poverty as a participation in Christ's suffering. But let's halt for a second, because understanding the significance of this requires us to travel back in time. Teresa wrote something in 1962, during her second decade of feeling abandoned, that foreshadowed her eventual understanding of her call to share in Christ's suffering. She said, "If I ever become a saint, I will be one of darkness. I will always be gone from heaven, illuminating the path for those in darkness on earth." This comment is significant because it implies that Mother Teresa was willing to sacrifice the joys of heaven for the benefit of those of us who, like her, lie awake at night wondering where God has gone. Teresa believed that her lifelong commitment to serving God via His people was only a front for her genuine job after death. But what made her so resilient in those hard times? And this is where it gets shocking. On the exciting occasion of Mother Teresa's second anniversary of death, Archbishop Giovanni Battista offered a homily, emphasizing the fundamental role of prayer in her extraordinary life. Her unwavering devotion to the poorest of the poor, both in Calcutta and around the world, sprang from her love for Christ. Here's a translation of his inspirational homily, which was originally delivered in Italian. Hold God's hand tightly and never let go on your trip. Drena, Agnes Consa Bujesu's mother, imparted these words of wisdom with her immediately after she decided to take holy vows. Agnes became recognized around the globe as Mother Teresa of Calcutta. God's love inspired her concern for the underprivileged. Her mother's statements foretold Saint Teresa's journey. Saint Teresa faced an enormous task as she joyously and boldly accepted God's hand. At only 36 years old, the Lord led her into roads she had never anticipated. But how difficult was this time? Maybe you should listen to this part. On September 10, 1946, moved by a tremendous inner calling, she left the wealthier districts of Calcutta and completely dedicated herself to the part of the city that Jawaharlal Nehru memorably referred to as a nightmare city. It was a site of great pain and neglect, teeming with impoverished and famished people, lepers, children, and the dying, who had been abandoned in the gutters. Another 4 years would pass before Saint Teresa established the Missionaries of Charity. Even before then, Saint Teresa was known as Mother Teresa of Calcutta. The decision to enter a nightmare city reflected the consistent and courageous choice of a woman who, after putting God at the center of her life, thoughts, and entire being, looked at all human beings, particularly the lowliest and poorest of the poor, with loving, compassionate, and merciful eyes. This was the choice of a woman who completely obeyed God's will and loved every human being as God does. This was Mother Teresa's secret. God was always the top priority in her life. Mother Teresa once met a poor man and invited him into their humble home, where she bathed him and restored his dignity. Curious, the man asked her, "Why are you doing this?" Mother Teresa simply responded, "For the love of God." Her love for God drove her to care for the underprivileged. She looked at them through God's eyes and loved them from God's heart. Mother Teresa's passion for God was built on a modest but profound foundation: prayer. Prayer was her first priority throughout the day. As she stated, "My secret is very simple. I pray, praying to Christ." Those who had the honor of knowing her and spending time with her were astounded and greatly moved by the intensity of her prayer life. Thus, she taught her spiritual daughters that the fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. And the fruit of love is compassion for the poor. What actually counts is what God communicates through us. Indeed, it was she who constantly advised the throngs of people who come to Kolkata to hear her teachings and find guidance in life that praying is to entrust oneself to God, to make oneself open to Him, and to hear His voice in the depths of one's soul. She lived what she preached, persuaded that prayer is the most effective approach to rebuild society. In fact, we cannot comprehend Mother Teresa's work unless we understand the importance of prayer. So, what precisely can we do here to follow in Mother Teresa's footsteps? Mother Teresa frequently reminded her girls that what we say is unimportant. What matters is what God communicates through us. Mother Teresa's kind life demonstrated the immense importance of love in the face of our time's horrors. Her acts were courageous, and she worked tirelessly. She used to say, "I'll never tire of saying that what the poor need is not just compassion, but love. They deserve to have their human dignity honored, which is no less significant or distinct from that of any other human being." She urged her sons and daughters to be willing to love to the point of sacrifice, even if it meant pain. After all, Jesus' love for us drove Him to His own death. This sister, with her head covered by a white sari with blue stripes, embodies St. Paul's words, "If I speak in the tongues of men and angels but do not love, I will win nothing." Mother Teresa presented us with the example of a woman who loved God passionately and channeled her limitless inner energy to serve the poorest of the poor. She bravely entered the city's impoverished districts, transforming the horror metropolis into a city of joy. Mother Teresa firmly thought that love was the greatest gift. Mother Teresa knew the gospel. For her, it was a gospel of love. And she understood it so deeply that everyone who met her realized that giving is more joyful than receiving. She went through life with unflinching drive, leaving a lasting impression on the world and influencing people around her to be nice and good. Her legacy will live on as a symbol of her strong love for God and sincere care for the value of every individual in human existence. May the same fortitude that drove her daughters and sons to commit themselves to the needy, to make those who have been defeated by life feel the compassion of God's love, illuminate our own and humanity's journeys. If you enjoy our content and want to support us, click on the Super Thanks button below. Your super thanks is not just a donation. It is a blessing that supports our mission to share the transformative journey of Jesus.